Everyone, welcome to Black with No Chaser. It's your boy TK, and joining me are some very special ladies and a very special guest, and we're here to talk about suicide prevention awareness. September is the month that's dedicated to this, and it is something that is very prevalent, not only across the world, but especially in the Black communities. And it's something that we really need to get out in front of and bring awareness to eradicate this problem. Now, joining me is Mrs. Lisa Butler, Dr. Calibra Jenkins, and Ms. DeShara C. Doub. And before we get into this, I'm going to sit back and let them introduce themselves to you all and give you all a rundown on their profession, their expertise, and their knowledge. So, Ms. Butler, I'm going to start with you.
Hi. Tyrus, please call me Lisa. It's fine.
Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry.
No.
Lisa.
Okay, thank you. My name is Lisa Butler. I am a licensed clinical social worker in private practice in Chicago. I have been working in social work for 20 plus years, specifically with African American women and girls, because I know a lot about that demographic, because I'm a Black woman and was a Black girl. My specialties are anxiety, depression, mother-daughter conflict, trauma. And if I had to say something about the topic tonight, I would say that suicidality has been a really big topic for me for most of my work in social work, just because I think it's something that happens in our community that we don't talk about because it's so stigmatized and because of other reasons, which I'm sure we'll get into tonight. So this is a really important topic to me. So I'm glad to be here and thank you for having me.
And thank you for doing this. I really do, really do appreciate this. So I'm gonna go to you, DeShara, let you introduce yourself.
Well, good evening, everybody. I'm excited to be back. I feel like it's been forever since we've been together. So I am a marriage and family therapist associate in the state of Kentucky. I'm also a fellow social worker, former mental health practitioner in a high school setting. Definitely have a lot of experience within the racial trauma aspect. I am currently pursuing my PhD in social work, where I'm going to be researching specifically around the intersection of mental health in the Black church. So I'm very excited to be here and very excited to engage in this conversation for sure.
Calibra.
Excellent topic. I think that is a wonderful place to be putting your research focus. I think that's an excellent topic. I wish you much luck.
I do too.
That's an area that definitely needs some research. So kudos to you for doing that. So I'm Calibra Jenkins, and I am the owner of Release and Restore Coaching and Consulting Firm. I graduated from Howard University and did my psychiatry residency and fellowship in child and adolescent psychiatry at Tulane University. I too focus on the Black community because we are a community that is steeped in stigma and has we have a lot of other issues that are preventing our access to care. So I dream of a world where mental health and physical health are viewed equally. The access for both of them, are equally and readily available to people everywhere, but especially people in our community. So I think this is a very important topic that we're delving into tonight. And I want to just emphasize how important it is. I recently had a friend who to die of suicide in the last month. So it has touched me personally recently. So I think this is something that we really need to talk about. We need to address that there are people there for us to get help from, and we just really need to be able to open up that dialogue in the Black community to make sure that we're reaching the people who really need it.
Yeah, I totally agree. And we've had so many mental health discussions before, and we talked about the stigma surrounding it, in the Black community. And I just want to say, if you are feeling, suicide is your only option, someone who feels that way, please reach out to them. Reach out to someone. You are not alone. There are outlets and people who are here to help you. So I want you to start us off, Lisa. You know, we had a brief discussion before, and you know, I know this is a topic that you really wanted to talk about. So I want to start with you, and my first question to you is like, what are some of the signs and signals that we can and should look for in order to help someone from your perspective?
So I think one of the things that there's so many signs, but one of the things that I think as a Black person, we can kind of think about, you know, people who are very social, right? And out and like to, you know, be around family and friends, suddenly withdrawing from events and things would be maybe a clue that we should probably talk to them about what's going on. I also want to say with us, if somebody says to you, I don't want to be here anymore, that's probably a good kickoff point for a conversation.
Hear that. Hear those words.
About what's going on, rather than pray about it, forget about it, you're going to hell, whatever, you know, folks tend to say to people when they say that. For kids, I would say if they're being bullied, if something's going on with them at school and they are visibly sad, not wanting to hang out or engage, that's another sign. Really heavy drug use, like out of the blue, that's not been there before. You might want to address that. There are lots of different signs to me that might indicate that you need to have a conversation with whoever this is about what's going on. Unfortunately, sometimes there are no signs. And I think both Dr. Jenkins and DeShara could probably attest to that. Sometimes people make up their minds and they do it. And we don't know what happened, or, you know, if there were no real signs. And I think for us, African Americans, we are now starting to talk about mental health and depression and anxiety and other diagnoses. But I think that for a long time we didn't. And then suicide really is stigmatized and not talked about. And so we just aren't even aware of what we should be looking for and how to address it. And so those are just some of the ways I think we probably could, you know, address it if we saw certain things pop up, behaviors.
You know, I like to think about it as anything that you see in a friend or a family member that's just different. That's something that is off. You know, we are often socialized to kind of ignore our spidey senses, but we have those for a reason. I think that when you feel it, if they're your friend, if you love them, even if they stop talking to you because you asked, it was worth limiting or losing a friendship because you cared enough to try to save them than to spare feelings, you know? So anything for me, when I feel like something is off, say something. If you're worried, say something, and couch it in the framework of, I'm not trying to be intrusive and I hope I'm not offending you, but these are the things that I've seen and I'm just worried and I want to ask. I tell people all the time, asking someone about suicide never leads them to want to commit suicide. Yeah. So you should ask that question if you feel it. If people have made innuendos or said things around you, it's okay to say, what does that really mean? Are you struggling? Do we need to have a conversation? You know, so I think that there's a lot of fear also. There's stigma, but then there's fear of, I don't want to offend. I don't want to lose a friendship. But in the long run, if you save a life, that friendship, losing that friendship and having that person still here would be well worth it.
Agreed.
Yeah, y'all hit it on the nose. And I will always say too, somebody that's experienced a significant transition in their life, that's another indicator as well. So a lot of times people don't adjust to transition very well. It could be, of course, if someone loses someone of some type of grief, whether it's a breakup, a loss of a loved one, in death or in relationship, things of that nature. Definitely notice that. Also, they talk a lot about people that plan. So if you know somebody that's typically not a planner, but all of a sudden they want to be very sentimental, they want to make sure that they're capturing every moment, and that's not what they're like. I want to very much distinctly talked about what Dr. Jenkins mentioned around the fact that if someone is typically not like this and all of a sudden you find that they are having some characteristics that is abnormal to them and they probably can't even explain to you why, because a lot of people won't come straight out and tell you, right? I think the sad part is as you hearing us talk about different signs and symptoms, there is not one particular one that tells you. And so a lot of times people don't know for sure, but I will go back to that intuition because all of us have it. And if something, even if it's very small, like a mustard seed, as they say in church, if it's small like a mustard seed, go to that person. If we start to have somebody heavy on our spirit, I know a lot of us have that too, which we ain't talked to someone in a while, or we know that someone is maybe going through some things, or they're Lisa mentioned that they, maybe are more withdrawn than usual and things of that nature. Please say something. Absolutely.
Agreed.
So I have a question for all of y'all, and each one of y'all kind of mentioned church in some of the things that you said, and Lisa, you said pray it away. We've heard that for every ailment in the Black household, from church, whether it's a headache to blindness to gout, everything. We hear just pray it away. But do you all think that is one of the biggest problems that we have, is that our relationship with the church is just lockstep for a long time, and for me, I kind of feel like sometimes that can be a problem. How do you all see that?
Oh, I definitely see it as a problem. I love Jesus the Christ. I was born and raised in church, but church has been protective for us in lots of ways, but it's also caused some barriers too, and really been kind of a thorn in certain areas of our lives. And this mental health has definitely been one of those spaces where it just hasn't been as helpful. And I don't think it's because people are mean or nasty or don't want folks to get help. I think it's because they don't know. And because we weren't involved in the mental health system for so long. That was their thing. That was white folks' stuff. And it just wasn't available to us. I think now it's definitely better. I've heard pastors say you can have Jesus and go to therapy at the same time. You can feel suicidal and still be saved, right? And so I think now we are starting to have those conversations in ways that we never have before. But I definitely think there is still some spaces in religion and church where this is not talked about and not received, and people aren't able to get the help that they need, via pastors and across pulpits, the encouragement that they need to seek help. I was at a church, at a very modern church in Chicago, a couple years ago, and the young woman praise leader was singing, and she stopped. She said, "Oh, I'm just happy to be here, and thank God, because this morning I was going to kill myself before I came to church." And I sat there, and I was done with service at that point, because in my mind, I'm like, okay, who's going to talk to her? What can we do to help her? And I saw her some months later, and I asked her, I said, what happened after that? She said nothing, that nobody approached her. And the pastor of this particular church is a physician. And so I just was really outdone by the fact that this woman said this over the pulpit in a church that's fairly progressive, and nobody, responded appropriately. So.
Yeah, I think the fact that historically church has been our hospital, has been our safe haven, has been the only place where we can be our authentic selves as a people. I think it caused a lot of faith leaders to be the gatekeepers of all things in the community. So when it comes to mental health, that has been something that has, of course, been stigmatized, of course, because unfortunately we have, as a people, have been experimented with and have been misused and things of that nature. But I am grateful that there are some churches that are becoming more aware. There's a lot of churches that are having counseling centers or having ministries of the sort and things of that nature. But absolutely, there are denominations and are very big, vast amounts of those that have faith that believe that, you know, Jesus can fix it. Jesus can't absolutely fix it, right? But at the same time, there is a necessity for also having the gifts and talents that God also created in the people that are mental health providers, physicians, etc. But I think that also goes back to, and I'm so troubled by that, particularly when you have folks, because I would have probably did the same thing if I would have heard it. My hat would have came on of like, okay, you have made a very clear indication that something is not right, and let's make sure we give you the resources that's needed. And the fact that people sometimes feel like they can take that hat off when they come into the sanctuary, when they come into religious spaces, that you're no longer that mental health professional or no longer that physician, that's somehow completely separate from the religious spaces. Absolutely is problematic. But I don't know who coined it. I'm gonna have to figure it out in my research. But this whole, like, I can have Jesus in therapy too, it is a real thing. Sadly, because of the religiosity of suicide being like the corner sin, right? Like it's something like you're absolutely not going to be forgiven. It has been something that maybe has not been talked about, although that's absolutely an issue within our community. But I'm hopeful that the unfortunate aspect of it is it has increased within our community, but because of that, my prayer, my hope is that can also ring the alarm for, you know, institutions such as the church to really talk about that in a meaningful way and really, you know, amplify the support systems or do those intentional ministries and connections so people can have supports, because that's really what it is, really having those, like, you know, those true support systems in place. I can talk about this all day, but I'm gonna go ahead and stop right there.
So how do you think we fix this as far as, like, you know, the church goes? Because I mean, you know, people are stubborn and stuck in their ways and, you know, just refuse to acknowledge that there is other ways other than praying it away. Like how do we, you know, safeguard against that being our norm moving forward?
You have to actively confront it. You know, you have
right.
This is the deal. I think that the churches that are a little bit more progressive are often led by younger people. And I think what's going to have to happen is that you're going to have some direct confrontation of these beliefs. You're going to have to remind people that just as you view the physician who deals with the physical body, there are also professionals who God has blessed with the talent to deal with the mental aspect of your body. And your head is not disconnected from your body. So if you wouldn't tell your congregation, someone who came to you for counseling regarding cancer, you wouldn't tell them to pray it away. You wouldn't tell somebody else who's suffering from depression or any other form of mental illness to pray it away. So the thing is that you're going to have to be able to confront some of these pastors, and not confrontationally, but, you know, have some open dialogue where you are actively inviting them into your space to educate them, you know, really educate them on what's happening and what's going on in order for them to be able to change that mindset. Because if we don't say anything, it's going to continue.
Dr. Jenkins, I wanted to just add to what you said. If people know that African-American boys 5 years to 12 years old are more likely to die from suicide than any other group.
2 times
maybe
as likely.
That would, so maybe that would spark, maybe we should be talking about also that for African-Americans ages 15 to 24, suicide is the second leading cause of death. So if you don't know this, because we ain't talking about it, or it's not on the front page of the newspaper on the headline story on the news, then you don't, okay, why should I be talking about that? When I learned those stats, I'm like, wait, the alarm should have been sounded, right? Like we should have sounded this alarm some time ago. Also, that since the pandemic, suicide rates have risen 122% in the Black community. So we got to start talking. I mean, it's happening, right? So I think when people know better, that gives them a chance to do better.
But I think that also speaks to the structural racism that exists. The reason that we didn't know, the reason
Absolutely.
that when I was in med school, Black people and suicide was not a thing. That was not something that was taught that was important. It was taught, you know, the rates of white suicide and white men and all of those things. But the problem is that there's no research going into that area. Nobody's looking at it. Nobody is studying it. Nobody is saying what effect is systemic racism or lack of access to care. What effect is that having on the general Black population, Black and brown population? What is that doing to them? So we also have to realize that not only are we not talking about it, the powers that be, the National Institute of Mental Health, the, you know, NAMIs of the world, those institutions aren't giving the Black community the attention that it needs in the research field.
Absolutely. And I will also point out two things. The first thing is I think people need to realize that you don't just enter into church spaces and tell them what you're going to do. It's definitely a relationship that has to be built. It's definitely that hierarchical system of like the eldership of how we deal with things in a Black community, go directly to the pastor and the trickle down. And I think just having the understanding of how church functions, I think is one of the barriers as to why a lot of times, unfortunately, a lot of needed services aren't going directly into the church. So I think that one, having education of how the system in church works, and that you are not going to turn around a church and its structure. You're going to have to go into the structure and you're going to have to be able to function at it as it is, right? And I think the second thing is making it relatable. So unfortunately, there are people that maybe secondarily know someone that has been impacted by suicide, right? Whether it's been an attempt or a completion. And I think making it relatable to people, because for a long time, this hasn't been something that we have talked about at the dinner table or in the pulpit or even in parking lot conversation, post a meeting or whatever the case is. And at least I so appreciate you mentioning those statistics, because children are such an implemental part within the church. And I think the fact of like just making it real to people, of like there could be a child in your community that could be impacted, a child at your school, someone that you serve in, you know, the community center, X, Y, and Z. And so I think making it relatable and also realizing that you're not going to come in and try to gentrify the church. You're going to have to come in and you're going to have to understand the systems that are in place. And you're going to have to learn the system as a community mental health provider to be able to truly make an effective change within that system.
I think it's important that when we go into those types of spaces, that we lead with statistics. There's no way that there's a church with a youth department who doesn't have at least one child who is suffering from some mental illness, whether that is secondary to trauma or whether that is secondary to, you know, something that's organically going on. There is absolutely no way that there is a church that has children that is not impacted by these things. You know, Black children, both male and female, the rates of suicide have increased faster in our community than any other community out there. Any other community out there. Like Lisa said, it's the number 2 cause of death of young people who are 15 to 24. And if you really think about that, number 2, only secondary to accidental death, like being accidents. So it's not healthcare issues. We are killing ourselves. And the question is why? What is going on? You know, I think that it's important that we talk about the things that are different that may be leading to some of the issues that we're seeing among young people. When we were in school, if we were bullied, we got to come home and get some respite. These young people, when they are bullied, they're bullied on the internet. There is no respite for that. It's 24 hours, 7 days a week. And these young people don't have a lot of coping skills. Unfortunately, we have not taught them to be resilient. This is the age of young people who everybody gets a trophy. Nobody's ever in the wrong. So we have not helped them build the necessary tools to deal with some of the things that are going on with life. You've got kids who are living in chronic poverty. You've got kids who have limited access to the basic needs in life. Like literally chronic poverty, not being able, if your parents don't have a job, you're worried about whether or not the lights are going to be on, if there's going to be food on the table. These are not things that are easy to deal with as an adult. So you can only imagine what young people are dealing with. So I think it's important that we realize that Black people suffer from, whether it's I experience racism, individually, specifically, or the shared trauma of hearing about racist things or watching racist things on TV, that hurts your psyche. That literally comes in. It's a shared experience that all Black people, unfortunately, are having to deal with. So I think that there are things that are going on in our society right now that are causing some harm that we are not addressing, or even understand the totality of what's going on. So we got a lot of work. We've got a lot of work to do.
And I'm in Chicago, and
yes,
bloody streets is the trauma, the compounded trauma of death and dying and murder and all the things that young people get to witness who live in certain neighborhoods. Witness, see, walk past every day. Not to mention, if you're a young boy or girl who lives in an urban area in Chicago, your safety is literally, you have to consider it block by block. So if I am walking to school in a neighborhood, I got to think about from corner to corner.
Am I crossing territories?
Potentially being murdered, right? So what does that do to somebody's brain to fight or flight? And over and over and over again until they don't care about living anymore. It's too much, right?
Yeah, I can tell you what it does to your brain. It causes chronic inflammation. Chronic inflammation in your brain. It rewrites your genetic code. Your body is not built to deal with that chronic inflammation and elevated levels of cortisol. The time, Dr. It's just not. All the time. So there are physical, biological ramifications for the things that these young people are going through. This is why ACEs became such a big deal. People who suffer from trauma when they are very young, they suffer from cardiac issues and all other types of maladies that occur secondary to the trauma that they experienced as young people. So, that's why I say again, your body is not disconnected from your head. We are one being, mind, body, and soul. All three of those things work together, and we need to be figuring out what we need to do in order to recognize all three and treat all three equally.
Absolutely. Amen. The church, you could pass the plate right now.
Come on, listen. Words. So it's unfortunate because we actually unfortunately had a situation this past week in Louisville, Kentucky, where a child got gunned down and killed at the bus stop. We have segregation of busing still in 2021. Right. So you have children that is going on the opposite end of town and not knowing what they're going to be faced with on that end of town, whether it's, like you mentioned, chronic poverty versus children of privilege. Right. So it's the bullying, the teasing, not only in person where there is no, I will say, effective resources or not enough resources in school to really handle that at a meaningful level. Then you're talking about the cyberbullying, the bullying on the bus, how long it takes kids to get from school to home. Then you have situations that just happen in Louisville where you have an entire community that is grieving the loss of a 16-year-old. That mom has to get on the news and say, my kid is not that kid. Because unfortunately, we have people in the comment sections thinking that because a child has experienced that, right, that they are like some type of kid, like they deserved it, right? So when you talk about that, social media, it plays such a huge role. And I definitely agree with you. Things are not as they were even when I was in school, when any of us was in school. And I think that the inability to kind of shift thinking of like, this is not the high school of yesteryear, not even 10 years ago, and being able to understand that a lot of the things that these kids are dealing with right now is things that never been seen before. And so it's just so unfortunate, the violence, the racial trauma. We're still in a pandemic, as much as, unfortunately there are some places that have opened back up, and how that has affected kids in terms of being isolated, or the inability to be around their friends, or people getting sick and chronically sick, having to be hospitalized, or unfortunately passing because of health related issues. I mean, it's just so many layers, and it's been going on for so long, where people are so used to short-term, concerns and issues now have extended to long-term issues. So it's so many layers to it. And unfortunately, a lot of people feel like that in order for them to escape all of the things, right, the best way to do it is just to be free of it all. And unfortunately, a lot of people do feel that way because they don't see an out or an exit.
Sure.
So I just wanted to point that out for sure.
DeShara, I want to just add to what you said. The idea, a lot of people think there's an assumption by a lot of older Black people, right, that there are two parents in the home failing these kids. And I'm like, well, it might be two people in there who are chronologically 15, 13, 14 years older than this child, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually, they're the same level. Age. So they're not able, these young people aren't being raised, or they don't have an emotional connection to these people.
Right.
They just live there and they're getting taller.
Oh,
that's pretty much it, right? There's nothing happening in the interaction where this child feels loved, supported, and cared for. So we've got to start thinking differently, taking off our lenses about, I'm 52. So I was raised, right, by my grandmother, my dad, uncles, grandma. I was raised, but there are a lot of young men and young women now who don't have anybody to really help them. And so
I think that's an important point. I think that's an important point. There is a difference between being raised and getting older. And there are a lot, I say it all the time, those children are just getting older. Nobody is raising them. Nobody is pouring into them. Nobody is listening to them. And that's the most basic thing that we can do, is listen. And unfortunately, these children don't feel heard by anybody. They don't feel heard by anybody. They are saying things and doing things, and the only thing we can see is bad behavior. It's not bad behavior. That behavior is not bad behavior. Sometimes, like you said, you have to take your lens off and say, well, why is it that this baby is wearing the Fashion Nova skin tight dress, and every time you see her, she has on something skin tight, and the weave is down her back, and she has on 6-inch stilettos? Have you ever thought that that's what she has to do in order to be able to eat? Have you ever thought that that's what she has to do in order to be able to have lights? I think that what you said is powerful. We have to take our own lenses off. I had a friend of mine who would say to me all the time, Calibri, you can't keep looking at stuff from your perspective. You got to see it from the other person's perspective. And he probably said that to me for 10 years before I really fully understood what he was saying. You have to take your own lenses off and stop judging these children and start to figure out, why is that the behavior? Where is that behavior coming from? And what is it that I can do to befriend them? First, you got to listen. What can I do to befriend them to help them see things a little bit differently?
Yeah. It's not what's wrong with them. It's what happened to them.
That's
or
right.
what's happening to them.
That good.
And I
think
that we are so, as a people, we can be so brutal, first to ourselves, but then to other people. And we don't give ourselves grace and compassion. So we can't extend it to other people. But when you are a child, the average shooter in Chicago is 15. Listen, he wasn't born that way.
A shooter. That's
Someone
right.
created a shooter. And until we start looking at the shooter and being empathetic to with the shooter and offering them grace and compassion like we do the shot, it's going to continue.
That's right.
Because in general, they're probably one and the same. Like if you look at both of them, very similar, So
very much so.
Yep.
So Just listen to you all talk. I couldn't help but think like back when I was younger up until now, like suicide in the Black community was just unheard of by me, growing up. That traditionally and historically wasn't us, and somewhere down the line, that tide shifted to where we seeing the numbers that we are now. Like Lisa, you brought up the numbers. I actually read that study on NIH website, talking about like especially the spike in suicide amongst Black kids and young kids. Like when I saw 5-year-olds,
5 to 12,
that just totally blew my mind, because like I just couldn't imagine what a 5-year-old could be going through to think that that's their only option. And that it really kind of hurt me to read it. I have 5 children. I just couldn't imagine going through that. Right. But like I just can't understand like why it happened the way it has. I mean, we've always dealt with racism. We've always dealt with having less men. Like we've always dealt with that. And now that you compound that in intergenerational trauma, as well as with the pandemic now, and it's just like you said, it's just more and more piling on and on. Like like you said, DeShara. So like when did you all because I know y'all deal with children a lot. Like when did you all recognize this huge shift, or did it just come out of nowhere and surprise you?
Let's think about it. The statistic says in the past 25 years, the rate of suicide attempts in the Black community has risen 73% in the past 25 years. So 25 years ago, I was probably 16 or so. So let's think about what happened in the past 25 years. When we were poor, we didn't know we were poor. We were loved, but we didn't know. You know what I'm saying? When social media became a thing, you became hyper aware of everything. You became hyper aware of what you had and what you did not have. You became hyper aware of the haves and the have-nots. And there's no way that you could necessarily escape that. I tell my little boy, you don't get a phone until you're 13. I've been telling him that forever. So now it's just gospel to him. Like, oh, I can't get a phone until I'm 13. But the reason that I picked that age is because I need to shield him from social media at every aspect for as long as I possibly can. Because I don't want him looking at social media and saying, oh, in order for me to be validated, I've got to have all these things. Or in order for me to consider her to be a pretty Black girl, she got to have, hair to her butt and always be in skin tight clothes. I want him to have a normal representation of what life is, so he will be able to discern, oh, that's just for the gram. That really is just for the gram. That's not real life. So I think that in my opinion, the number one thing that is keenly different in the past 25 years is the fact that life never turns off. You cannot escape certain things, and that the social media has put everything in your face all the time. Not just the haves and the have-nots, but the overwhelming, we would endure racist things, but the overwhelming amount of racism that we're having to witness, the amount of murder porn that we're watching. I had to stop. I'm like, no, I will not watch another Black man, Black woman be murdered on camera, because that does something to your brain. It just does something to your brain. So I think that is the number one thing. We've always had health disparities. We've always been in, this prime situation of systemic racism and structural inequalities. So those things are the same. I think the big thing that is different is that, we never turn off. Everything is always visible. You're hyper aware of the world at all times. And we are not built to have to deal with that. And these young people definitely aren't.
Oh, Dr. Jenkins, you are hitting every point I feel like I've been making to people for years, as particularly that we are not built for this level of all the time, for just even your eyes just scrolling through stuff. What is it doing to your brain, to your heart, to your literal heart and your heart, right?
Right.
To your spirituals, all of
Yes.
it. And I beg my clients all the time, turn this stuff off. Walk away from it.
Yes.
It's like you, and when sometimes I'll ask my clients, what are you looking for when you're scrolling for out? What are you looking to see? What is it going to bring you? It is. It's
Yes,
just,
ma'am.
it's unbelievable. I'm so glad that you're saying what you're saying, because it's just the truth.
Yeah. And I'll even expand upon the social media aspect. I think the fact that community is not what it was when we were younger. Like, it's this fake friends. It's this, I have friends on social media. Like, there was a reason when Facebook particularly was created, that all of a sudden they're calling people friends, right? And so kids don't know the relationship. Right? The relationship is not the same. There are kids that literally do not know how to talk to people face to face. They're so accustomed to texting, or so accustomed to having a screen in front of their face as they're talking to someone. So like those social skills, that ability to be able to have authentic and genuine conversation.
Yes.
And so I absolutely agree with you. I think that the onset of social media, and kids are getting cell phones younger and younger and younger. I can't imagine the things that go on. Okay. I had that old school receiver where I got the phone and I got cut off.
When the line was busy, you couldn't get
I need to use the phone. Get off the phone, thanks. You know?
Wait a minute. No. My mother would just come in and hit
yes.
She'd tell me twice.
Too long.
She'd tell me twice. Just hit the button and your friends was gone.
Absolutely. But there's none of that anymore. It's always ways around that now, if you think about it. In our day, we had the receiver, right? You might have the receiver in the living room, so everybody gonna hear your conversation. The whole family is a part of it. Okay, we're not gonna be caking, as we used to call it. We ain't gonna be caking and bringing that phone in another room, right? But now there is so much access to so much. As you said, you can get on the internet, and it's an addiction. It's a new, an addiction that hasn't really been talked about as much, because we think of addiction as like substances, substance use and abuse and things of that nature. But literally the fact that the touch, like that tangible, having the phone and doing this, that like people cannot stop, right? Like,
because it lights up the same part of your amygdala that cocaine and overeating and watching porn. The amygdala lights up like a Christmas tree, the exact same way.
And the fact that you can't have that conversation, so you're having to constantly tell people, like you would tell everybody else, like what, like almost what's the steps of addiction? Like how do you get someone? How do you taper someone off? It's like we haven't talked about that a lot, of like, how do you deal with that with someone that's having something that people don't necessarily think is bad, right? So even adults, I know adults at this point that have lost the art of communication and genuine conversation in relationships. It's like a new thing. And like you mentioned, like the point that you have to prove on social media. So people are like stunting for the gram, as they call it, or like they feel like that they have to post their whole life. Like, people aren't going to check on you unless it's social media, right? Like, these genuine relationships aren't really there anymore, or people can't talk to you. So it's this whole disconnect of like, we are social human beings, right? That we desire connection, intimacy, those types of things. And then that's completely blocked.
Right.
With the onset of social media and usage of phones. Did
you all happen to see or hear the quote from Michaela Coyle, the actress? She's a director, producer, beautiful Black girl. She's has a show on HBO, or had 2 shows on there, but she made this beautiful quote speech the other day. She won something, and she talked about how we use social media to feel visible. Like it gives us a sense of visibility. And she asked us at the end of what she said was to step away from it. Step away from that, from everybody else, and go and try to figure out what silence could bring to you. And I was just, what the quote was so much more beautiful than I just gave it to you, but it hit me so hard for me too, right? Step away from that. What does silence bring? But also I wanted to say too, for young people, the one thing that I did have was my mother helping me to cultivate some kind of spiritual space as a young person.
Yes.
A lot of young people don't have that.
No.
I'm not just talking about church. I'm just talking about an acknowledgement of something bigger than
yourself.
Something that you can give your problems to, that you can lay your burdens down. You know what I mean? Respect and all those kinds of things. And a lot of young people just don't have that today. And they literally are like ships without sails.
Yes.
They're just out here.
Yes.
Yeah. So,
but you bring up a really good point, Lisa. The point of parenting. The point of parenting. Not only has social media damaged the young people because they're on it so much and it's warping their sense of reality, but parents use it to be a babysitter for their children. They use it to zone out from their own life stressors. And the unfortunate part is that we're ships passing each other in the night, even in our own homes, because we are, as parents and as children, we are constantly engaged in something that is not literally giving us anything back. You know, I am the person who says you have to have game night. It's got to happen. You got to have game night once a week. If you're not having fun as a family, what good is your family? If everything is, we're arguing about something, I'm fussing at you about homework, you're mad at me because I wouldn't let you, use your phone or whatever, then what good is family? If there's no goodness to it, what good is family? And I think that as parents, we have lost the ability to engage with our own people in our own homes because we're so busy, because we don't value silence, because we are so busy trying to make sure that we do have something to put on Facebook. We do have something for Instagram. We're so busy keeping up with other people that we're not engaging in our own households. And I think that if we could get back to a point where we're actually parenting, we would be telling our young people, I don't know why you have headphones on with your computer or your iPad. I need to hear it. I need to know what you're listening to. I need to know what rabbit hole you're going down. You know what I'm saying? You're not going to be in your room from the time you get home from school to the time you go to bed. I need to see you, because if something is going on, I'll never know because you're in the room all the time.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I have to be uncomfortable as a parent. I don't want to know about Minecraft. I don't care, but my little boy loves it. So I am talking to him about Minecraft and all the dinosaurs in the world because he knows every one of them. That's not my cup of tea. But I have to be uncomfortable as a parent because I need to let my child know that, number one, what he cares about, I care about. Number two, what he finds important, I have to validate so he will know that my thoughts and my feelings are important to somebody outside of myself. So
absolutely,
parenting is a difficult thing. It's easy to pop out a baby. It is hard to raise a human being. And I think that is where we have fallen short so often, is that we are not recognizing that we have to be uncomfortable when we have these little people.
Absolutely. That's why I'm just at 52. I'm just now getting ready, starting the foster to adopt, because I just feel like
you can give up some time. That's right.
Like I got enough sense to actually be a parent to a child. In this idea that mothering and fathering is just a natural thing that happens. No, it is not. So I appreciate both of you so much tonight. I mean, wow, this is fantastic.
Thank you. And the village is still important. I just want to point that out too. I don't know when the village mentality left our community, but it's still necessary, having that big sister influence, that aunt or uncle, because even when we were younger, there were things that we didn't feel comfortable sharing with our parent, but we always had someone else, another trusted adult that we can go to. And so please make yourself available to have a young person come to you. If they trust you, if they think you are cool, whatever, like just be welcoming to them, because that's really what's missing. A lot of times they feel like their voice is just not important anymore.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I agree.
So, and I know how passionate you all are about this. I mean, DeShara and Calibra, we've literally talked hours upon hours of various aspects of this, but we do have jobs and kids and whatnot we have to get back to. So before we close things out, I want to, go to Lisa, to let you give us, one of your closing thoughts, and then I'll go with you, DeShara, and Calibra. I want you to close us out.
Listen, I just want us to, I think Jesus was the master social worker in my mind, right? And I want us to really take on those attributes of caring and loving our community, our children, and talking to people and engaging with them and asking them what's going on, and showing up in ways in their lives where they know that somebody cares. Somebody loves me. I'm accountable to somebody. I think that's just really important within the context of young people and suicide. Ask the question. Don't be afraid. Ask, talk to, listen to things that you might not want to hear, just so that we can potentially save some lives. And that to me is it, just showing up as love in people's lives and young people's lives.
Absolutely. I'm just going to give out a number. The National Suicide Prevention
Absolutely.
Lifeline. Put it in your phone, text it to a friend. If they don't go to you, they need to go to somebody. Okay. 24/7, 365. 1-800-273-8255. Okay. 1-800-273-8255. You are not in this by yourself. There are people that's there to support you, even if it's someone that's not close to you, that you don't feel comfortable in telling them. Tell somebody your worth, that your life matters. And I'm so grateful and appreciative of always to be with TK and Dr. Calibri and Lisa. Just thank you all so very much for just this space this evening.
You.
Okay, so I want to just remind everybody of what to look for. I want everybody to know that if you see something, say something. If your person, your friend, your loved one, your child is different from normal, it's okay to ask. Asking the question, are you thinking about hurting yourself? Does not, will not, has not ever led to somebody who was not suicidal committing or attempting suicide. The other thing that I want people to remember is, in children, you don't always see sadness. Sometimes it's irritability and anger and, just this heavy load of frustration that young people will have. And that in and of itself, that impulsivity can be, a scary thing. But the questions that you need to ask are simple. Are you thinking about hurting yourself? Again, that statement has never led anybody to hurt themselves or to carry out a plan. So you see something, you ask somebody, and like DeShara just gave, use that number to help them get to where they need to be.
Yeah, for me, I've learned a lot just sitting here listening to all three of you. Y'all know my role. I just started off and I sit back and listen like everybody else to learn as much as I can. And as always, I'm very appreciative to you, Calibri, to you, DeShara. Thank you, Doctor. I'm sorry. Thank you, Miss Lisa. I said Miss again. Thank you, Lisa.
I receive it. I received
future doctor, Miss Lisa Butler. I do appreciate you coming by. I know your time is valuable, and you came here with us, and I really do appreciate it. I just want to let everybody know, watching this, we will be coming back to doing our usual thing once a month at least, with various mental health topics, joined by some of our other family members, Agent Marshall, my boy Jerry Washington. There's so many of us that's really a part of this mental health thing, and we're really doing our best to remove the stigma and make it work. So, as always, thank you guys for supporting us. Thank you guys for tuning in. And like DeShara said, if you need help, need someone to talk to, please, please, please dial that number. You are not alone. On behalf of myself,
thank you so much.
On behalf of Dr. Calibri, on behalf of DeShara, on behalf of our special guest, future Dr. Lisa Butler, on behalf of Black with No Chaser, I thank you all for tuning in. And I look forward to seeing you guys on our next talk. Y'all have a good one.